fangen nun jetzt der Heilig Sheni von der Shir. Right now we're being mamshir the Shir, the Harav, Hagoin, Yechezkel, Auerbach, Shlita.
You bring it up.
Shh, I won't shop. The tape action.
It's good. The question regarding oils. There's so many oils that are made in the United States, in Canada, and then there are other oils that are brought from other places in the world. It's like canola oil, cottonseed oil, walnut oil, hazelnut oil, grapeseed oil, rapeseed oil, olive oil. Now some of these are not good to Pesach because they're kidneys. Some of these officially are good for Pesach, but they're made in places which they also make chametz. So which oils are good for a whole year, and which oils should somebody be careful to better use those on Pesach if he uses oil, and which olive oil are good for a whole year and which for Pesach?
The canola oil made in the United States or even Canada should not be a problem because of simply the volume of what they make. They don't use the same plants for the canola oil as for other things, those in the same lines. Corn oil, canola oil made in the United States do not present any problem. Olive oil, anything made overseas, you have to be very careful of. Especially, let's say, something that has palm oil, coconut oil, these things require a hechsher. It is best if there are people that think that they have to use this for health purposes, and they'll use coconut oil. A lot of people use coconut oil or avocado oil. If it is manufactured unrefined, cold pressed, and bottled at the source where it's manufactured, that would be fine. It doesn't really even require hechsher. If they're bringing it in bulk to the United States, then you have to make sure that it's being done under a very strong hechsher. Not that a person should think, what's the big deal? A lot of, for instance, olive oils, there was an agency that just put out this Keurig that they did research, and all olive oil, extra virgin olive oils are kosher. So I said to the mechaber of this Keurig, I said, you know that the oils that you're getting are farmed by these little farmers in Tunisia. It says it. Look in the bottle. I'm not telling. This isn't. You don't have to be a chacham gadol to know this. It says in the bottle. It's coming from little farms in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Libya, Liberia, Schwarzjahr. Now, these people, a gallon of olive oil costs $16. A gallon of soy oil with a little green color costs $1.25. I said, where's your? He says, I hear. I said, okay. Now what? So, but it's a mistake. People think the agencies are under the impression that extra virgin olive oil is kachim and no one would pachka with it. It's simply not true. You need a very eingeschlossene hechsher. The Velover told me that the only oil that he has a meshkiach tmidi for from beginning to end is the olive oil that it says kosher Pesach, which is what I advise people to use in their house. If you're going to use an olive oil, use geffen that says kosher Pesach, or something with the Ada from Eretz Yisrael itself, not from outside Eretz Yisrael. And then you know that you're getting a kosher product.
Cottonseed oil?
Cottonseed oil is not a problem, except there's Miniger Schleim that considers it probably during the 1800s when people were starving, they were eating cotton. It's not a part of kidneys. It's not meat the achila.
And the people that are makbid to get walnut oil or hazelnut oil, which could be made in a place that...
So then you have a real problem. I can tell you that I know of a story. A friend of mine told me, this is mashkiach for another agency. He told me that he goes into this specialty refinery for his hechsher, and he saw that they were bottling oil for a certain hemish hechsher. So he called the Rav Machsher and he says, did you kasher this? He says, you don't have to kasher. He says, really, why? He says, because it's kosher. He said, yeah, but last week they made wheat germ oil in the stuff that he was in the same kalim. He says, I don't believe it because I went on the website and they don't have wheat germ oil on the website. So that's them, they don't have to kasher, and that's what it was. So you have to know that the agency that is giving the hechsher that you're relying on actually has some idea what they're doing.
Is there any mila from Hamish peanut butter over the commercial peanut butters? And again, with the private labeling, is it a bigger problem?
I do not believe so. So the natural, what they call natural peanut butter, which they literally just grind down the peanuts, and you can usually see it because the oil separates. You have to remix it each time you use it. That has nothing in it except for peanuts and salt. There's no reason to use anything other than Kamat doesn't even need a hechsher.
What about the regular peanut butter?
Regular peanut butter has an emulsifier in it. Now the emulsifiers that they use, that I'm familiar with, are kosher emulsifiers. I do not think there's anything wrong with using Skippy, because I'm familiar with the emulsifiers that they use, and I think it's perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, it's the same ones that the Hamish ones use. And but like you said, some people like to make sure that they're something. I'm not sure what they're making sure of.
Frozen orange juice, they come in those cans that people get them for week, and the same thing, apple juice. Is any hechsher good to them, or does it need any special hechsher?
It doesn't need a hechsher, and any hechsher that's there doesn't do any more than no hechsher. So if Rick is giving you whatever they're giving you, it's
basically concentrate.
Any orange juice you're going to buy is going to be identical to any other one with an OU or an OK or a star K or anything else. So whichever one's cheapest. If you hold there's a problem, you can't drink any of them. If you hold there's no problem.
I'm not talking about the bug problem. I'm talking about the frozen ones. Do they get processed with any enzymes?
No, you mean for Pesach for a whole year?
For a whole year?
No, there's no problem. Even the enzymes that they would use would not be a problem. And then you should, in fact, the only thing that's being processed with enzymes is the lemon juice because of the way it expresses. They use an enzyme that breaks down the cells so that they get a predator, but they don't use that in oranges.
Canned or jarred pickles. We just had a big problem with pickles that come from India. I was in Farsim a few times, and some companies made recalls. There was Libras in the beginning of the year, then there was a company that sold Reuben's hechsher, now it's B&G.
Right.
All the cucumbers that come from India. And there was a big mashgiach from Eczema, Mumcha and Telom. He went to India and he sent me a message that he's there. I told him, I warned him, you're going to find worms, and within 15 minutes, he showed me worms.
Yeah.
Are other canned or jarred pickles from other places a problem or not? And is there a problem with the ingredients that come from? The
ingredients are well, here's the story. It needs a good hashgacha for the following two reasons. One is because if the hashgacha, and this doesn't even help, if the hashgacha allows them to use junk, if you look to see the products that Libras was canning, it was junk. They were using the most gemeine. What should I say? Yidden are milked dry for paying for kosher food. The Hamish companies think that they can rice and lebendike stick of flesh for kosher food, and you didn't pay it. So at least if you get a quality product, no. But they give you this biggest junk, and they charge you the highest price. So, first of all, it's not from the lack of ehrlichkeit, it's not clear to me why you should feel you're going to get a more kosher product. But, when they use junk, you can't get a better end product than the raw materials. And if they take the stuff, and if you spoke to the Meshkichim the other day, they took the filthy pickles with the mud still on them, and knapp, they shranked the rice before they made it. So what do you expect?
They got for this production, they just spent a lot of money to get a new mashgiach there. He was supposed to, he sent me pictures, he did a good job there. But yeah. What about canned olives, canned peppers from Europe, from many Arabic countries, Israel?
Well, Eretz Yisrael, obviously you need a very good, because it was not even Shemitah, but for the rest of the year, for Tavel, for things like that, you need a very good hashgacha on that. But from other countries, so if it's done in brine, it really shouldn't be that much of a problem. But if they have the processed ones that have, look at the ingredients. If it says polysorbate 80 level, say, then it needs a very good hechsher. Especially in Europe. In America, most of the polysorbates are coming from kosher. But in foreign countries, you never know what it is. If it has polysorbate 80, you cannot use it without a very strong hechsher. And the hechsher that's actually there, not just...
And canned vegetables from all over.
Canning is a kalim problem. Even if you don't have to be worried about the item itself, but the canneries are constantly doing work other than vegetables. The vegetables have a season for 2 months. They're not going to let this big factory sit there for 10 months a year empty. They use the cannery for other types of things. So you need a hashgacha. A decent hashgacha, even if they only give hashgacha on the vegetables, will be there regularly during the year to see what else is going on to take care of it.
There's almond milk, soy milk, rice milk. Some of them have hamish achshem, which might not be any better than the other ones. Some of them have agencies, some of them have good hamish achshem. What could be the problem? And
here's what the problem is. If it's a refrigerated item, it's much less of a problem. Some of them they sell in the refrigerated case. That's much less of a problem because that's very simple to kasher and to take care of, and that's kamat no chashash at all. And those can be used even with regular agent and OU. If you're going to talk about the shelf-stable items, the stuff that you find not in the refrigerated section, the brick pack, those are manufactured in a special machine which is very, very complicated and very difficult to kasher. And there's a certain mila in using OU product because the OU has people who are very big mumchim in setting up these type of machines and the kashering in them. And they've programmed into the machine itself the kashering procedures. Now, some people they'll only use stuff from mushroom. Certain almond plants were manufacturing product that was only kosher. It was only kosher parv. So obviously, if something's kosher parv, you're not going to, you do away with the huge preponderance of what the shilas could be. But it is very common to use this machinery for not kosher also. And if the product was not kosher, and you send in somebody to kasher it who doesn't understand the machinery, it's very, very difficult to do it right. So...
recently, two mashgichim that worked for Bingo, Bingo, not everybody knows, is not owned by one person. I mean, the store is owned by one person, but they have sections, different sections. So the bakery is owned by Stearns, and the meat is owned by Birdsboro. And the nut factory, they have two types of candies. There's one that's packaged on the anyway, and the other one is the nut factory, which is owned by Fry that doesn't put on phone, does not Shemesh Shabbos, unreliable at all. And he brings in everything. He used to have the chug, which the hashgacha is not worth much, and now he got Belz and Eitzol, which is not worth too much, but better than that. And there's a Kashrus going on there, she'in kamoyu, and I sent out the emails to a bunch of rabbonim and to a bunch of people. The packaging, the schur that comes in there, and the Kashrus that goes on there is sheklach. And this is just a Lalamid ala klal kula yotza. There's a lot of store owners that are very similar to that also, because they're hamish, or they look hamish, and they need to make panasa, and they bring in so many different hechsherim, hopefully. And I could say this, I went into certain stores and they had candies which had, some of them had at least a OU, and some of them had nothing on it. And I called the owner, I showed him, he says, it was distributed by Hadar. Not Hadar owns it, but the truck. They brought this also. They bring candies that don't have hechsher at all, and it was treif. I read the ingredients, it was clearly treif, and people don't have that. You need hashgacha on every single item, and it should be packaged by somebody who has a full achrayis, and should know what he's doing. Because some people who give hechsherim have no shaykhs. Not today, I could say even in Auerbach, lately I'm getting shalos about new hechsherim, new names. People have no shaykhs to. I think you should expand a little bit on this.
It's a very big problem. There have been numerous stories about repacking where there is no hashgacha. The name that's on it never knew that they were supposed to be in charge of it. and even if they knew, they don't know how to be in charge of it. There are numerous cases of these types of what is considered to be a Hamish store that prints labels that have hashgachas that do not even know that the name appears there. If there's no mashgiach in the store that you can say, who is achroi for this, you shouldn't be buying it. It's as simple as that. And you can't even, and loss of lover, you're going to give it din v'cheshbon for what you got, and you're going to say there was, you think you can be able to sell that to the Besim Shalmaila? Well, it said it had a name on it. What kind of baloney is that? You wouldn't buy, if somebody wanted, there's a famous Maisa with Rishol Salanta was traveling around, and he asked the Balabas, he was staying in somebody else, he says, he needs some money, 20 ruble, whatever, can you lend it to him? He says, listen, I don't know who you are, I can't stop give money, I trust you. So then the guy, he had Sheikh Levi, he says, by the way, I have a Kabbalah for Shechita, says, do you need anything? Because there used to be that people used to take their chickens to the Sheikh. Says, do you need anything? He says, oh yeah, taka. Maybe you can chef the chicken for you. He says, Sheikh was the best. You don't trust me for $20. You trust me to chef the. These guys, you don't know who it is. If you don't know who is giving the hashgacha there, and there's not a person you can talk to and say, who is achroi to make sure that the stuff that's in this repack is really what it says it is. Forget about that it's kosher. Then it isn't what it says it is. If there's nobody there, it's damchol reishka if you buy in such a store. And the truth is that if there would be rabbanim with a sense of achrayus, they would be them together, and they would ban these things. They would make a cher of these things. They would say you can't buy in these places.
I know the CRC has on the list a list of 4 Recola candies that they approve. There's many more, and lately, the past 2-3 years, they came out with so many different flavors. You said in the past that the Recola candies that are sold in the United States are good. Is that still the case today, or since there's so many more, and the sticker on it is not worth much?
The sticker's nothing. But the ones that have them more, what I advise people to do, if you want to avoid any concerns whatsoever, if you stay with the original, that means that the menthol, the lemon, the tea verbena, the honey, these are perfectly, both the sugar and the sugar-free are perfectly fine. These other flavors that you're telling me, I'm just simply not familiar with it. I'm just not.
When it comes to vitamins, especially now that COVID came around, a lot of people start taking more vitamins. The vitamins need a hechsher. Could they be considered a medication? Are they a food supplement? And especially the vitamins that are chewable, that have a taste, do they need a hechsher? The
vitamins that are chewable and have a taste have a din of food, they have a din of a candy. And if you absolutely have to be absolutely sure that it's kosher. Or you somehow, if it has a flavor, I don't know how you can find out if it's kosher, if it doesn't have hashgacha, but absolutely you have to end up doing that. Now,
vegetarian helps?
What?
Vegetarian helps?
No, not for the flavor. That being said, if it's a pill that you swallow, there is no question. I'm not going to get into Pesach, but for the rest of the year, there's no question from the Pesachim that we spoke with. There was not one Pesach, it was Yechezkel that said a medicine that you swallow, you don't have to be concerned about it. Bechlal, it's not der chachila. He says, even so, I said, well, how about many of these medications are compressed with lactose? It doesn't make a difference. Even after fleishiks, you can take a lactose-based pill. That's not considered a der chachila.
That's because it's a medication. It's like shared soda, right?
Because it's medication.
But a vitamin.
Vitamins. Here's where it's interesting. If you hold that a vitamin is a food supplement, so then it has all the chemicals. This is the Nachayk from Repacking for Ramesha. If you hold that it's a food supplement, and the reason you're eating it is because the food used to have all the nutrients, and now because they process it, they take it out, so you have to eat the vitamins also, and just to make it up, so it has a din of food, and it has all the chaymer of food, and you have to be makbid on it like any other food item. If you hold, but then the good news is you can take it on Shabbos because it's a food item. If you hold it's a medication, you can't take it on Shabbos, but if something that's not a food item Rav Belsky said this here many times, that something that's not a food item doesn't need shishim, you just has to be bought l'chad tray because mikra din, that's what this, so that would be fine.
That's not a food supplement.
If it's not a food item.
So who is he's the mabar to say what it is?
If people, something like these nutraceutical things is stam mishagas. It's just treifa, it's treifa lactose. You know, people use this stuff.
So it should be like a get. If somebody's a choila and we know that this helps, then he's allowed to take it as
like
a medication.
But the Gemara already talks about that. The Gemara says that something has to be bodik menusa. You can't just suddenly decide. Some guy standing by the counter tells you, "Oh, if you take this, it's going to be good." It has to be. That's the whole Gemara on Shabbos. Everybody, you have to have a reif mumcha. It has to be bodik that is bodik menusa that it works. It has to be mu'uyan for you. It doesn't work for everybody. But if you know that this, if you go to a doctor who's not just Tam Meshugan, and just here, take this and this, and he knows your case, he knows you, he says that this is what you need for your health.
I had people calling me, their child has terrible eczema, and there's a guy in Lakewood, in a pharmacy, that he gives them a certain type of one of these probiotics, and he says only a certain company works, and it doesn't have a hechsha, but they tried others and it didn't work. In such a case, you could say he's taking it as a medication, and it should be mutter. Then you have over-the-counter drugs, all these things, and then you have, I spoke to Rabbi Auerbach from the Square Bezdin. He tells me, that, people call, and the child has high fever, or the child had an allergic reaction. You're not allowed to tell them to look for a hechsha. If a child is... So, and then there are some that came up with a hechsha. And when it comes to Tylenol, to Motrin,
here's the problem. Here's the problem. If they would have come out with the medication with the hechsher, that would have been one thing. Because everybody certainly agrees that taking something with the hechsher is a good idea. But if first you spread a rumor, which is sheker v'chazov, that Motrin and Tylenol brands have trefiglycerin, which is sheker and chazov, and you say that, and we're going to come out with something, and then they don't come out with ultimate. There's ibuprofen, there's acetaminophen. They work in different ways. If you have a normal doctor, a good doctor will be able to tell you that you can even take them alternately every 2 hours because they're not a stira, they complement one another. And then you go into, first you scare everybody into thinking everything's straight. Then you come out with one, which I hope is effective. I hope it's a real medication. Because I've seen that a number of these Heimish stuff, when you talk to the companies Lachsachais, they say that they use the cheapest junk, it's not even effective. I'm not saying that about this new Motrin that came out. Halavai should be good. But certainly, if a parent is mainayed themselves for 1 second to give their kid who has 104 fever, not to give them the regular Motrin because they don't have the kosher stuff, it's dumb amelioration, they're also leading us in dinner.
And which sodas with a national election?
That being said, if you buy an off-brand, a lot of insurances only pay for the off-brand. They don't pay for Motrin or Tylenol. If you have an off-brand, you need to check out every single time you buy it. You have to call the company to find out if it has vegetarian glycerin.
What is an off-brand?
An off-brand is something, let's say you go to Walgreens, or you go to Target, or you go to Walmart, and they have, the only two things that I can tell you certainly use vegetable glycerin is the Motrin brand that says Motrin and the Tylenol brand that says Tylenol. But if something else that says, compare this to Motrin or compare it to Tylenol, or it says ibuprofen or acetaminophen, that doesn't mean anything. You have to call the company to make sure that this particular lot number was manufactured using vegetarian glycerin.
You just reminded me to talk about Tom's. Tom's used to be under a decent hechsher years ago, and then he was nifter and somebody else took him over, and he came out with other flavors. Now Tom's is available through Walgreens, ShopRite, and Dwayne Reed with a star K.
Yes.
As opposed to the other one, Tom's that some of them don't have hechsher at all, and they're really treif. So people that are machmir to take Tom's, they should take the off brands.
It's not actually manufactured by Tom's. Uri Newman is the mishkan. Uri Newman is the mishkan.
The Gabi sodas, I know people keep on sending shoutouts from Eczema from other places. There's a lot of sodas that come now, the brand name sodas that from the United States, they're made in Ukraine, they're made in Mexico, they're made in Ireland, and of course they're made in the United States. Which brand name sodas are good, let's say in the United States, Mexico, or Canada, and other places, and which brand name sodas you have to be more careful?
Well, the question is a good question, but the sharper part of the question is that they're constantly coming out with new flavors, and at least once a month they're coming out with new flavors, and it's almost impossible to keep up with that. And just like with the Vaseline that I spoke to you before. You know, if I know that the Coke and Diet Coke and caffeine-free Coke and ginger ale and Sprite are kosher. So if that's not enough for you, you know, go find somebody else that'll help you.
No, that's what I'm saying. And the same thing is with the Pepsi company.
And in the United States.
In the United States.
The difference in Pepsi and Coke is that Pepsi manufactures their products from the ground up in other countries. Coca-Cola makes their sodas in 4 steps, and these 4 steps, it is a flavor, a concentrate, a syrup, and then the bottling. And the first 3 steps, they make themselves, period. I mean, they only make it in their place the same way, and they distribute it that way. That means wherever you're going to go in the world, you're going to get a Coke. It's going to be manufactured from a flavor, which is made into a concentrate, which is made into a syrup, by the Coca-Cola company and delivered to the bottler. So, and once it's there, it's knapp to have a shayla. Somebody once told me in Spain, they have sugar that's made from wine. It's just, okay, but Pepsi is made, they say that we're not as crazy as Coca-Cola, and wherever they are, any country makes their own stuff. So Pepsi I would not drink outside the United States.
So plain Coke and Sprite should be good?
I think so.
All over?
Yeah.
We're talking about sugar. I just reminded myself, the OU put out a zettel about sugar a few months ago, I think, that the process of sugar, which everybody used to believe that doesn't need any hechsher any time, but for Pesach it might need a hechsher because there's an amylase and there's some other type of, I think dextrose that goes into some type of process, which could either be chametzik, it could either be kidneys at least.
It's an enzyme which is grown on kidneys, and in Europe, depending on where they get it could be that the dextrose itself that grows on has some wheat starch in it.
So which sugar should one use for Pesach?
Well, you certainly need one with a hechsher, and especially since this is not, it's stuff mufursim now among the agencies, certainly anything that has a hashgacha on it, an OU or an OK, a star K, would certainly be manufacturing from product that has kosher Pesach. Or at least, or not using the enzymes, which used to be the case.
I was in fascinated with Rabbi Auerbach many times, but it seems like the Olam doesn't seem to get it so much. People think that seltzer, because seltzer doesn't need a hechsher a whole year, so flavored seltzer doesn't either need a hechsher. Or is there any truth to that? No, is this plain K worth anything?
No, a plain K means nothing at all. I don't understand. You go into every Hamish store, they're selling vintage seltzers. The vintage seltzer has the same hechsher as Hebrew National Meat. If you trust somebody that feeds Yidden Hebrew National Meat, then you can use that seltzer. If you wouldn't eat Hebrew National, there's no reason you should use the vintage seltzer.
With the flavor.
With the flavor.
And for Pesach, you should have a hechsher if you want to drink seltzer.
It should be. It's very rare for a distillery to take the. Here's the most common source of natural carbon dioxide is from a fermentation, and every fermentation creates carbon dioxide. First of all, even a carbon dioxide that's manufactured from a chametz stick of fermentation, it's not clear that that's not kosher, that it's a problem for Pesach. And even if it is, it's a very, very uncommon thing to use that type of a carbonation for a drink, for seltzer, especially cheap seltzer, because a natural carbon dioxide is very expensive. They're not going to waste it. They buy carbolics, which is made from dirt, so there's no reason to assume it happens.
The vodkas that come with the KSA, all the flavored ones are fine?
There are 3 exceptions. There are 2 of them. There's something called root beer float, and another one called cappuccino that are dairy. It's marked dairy. Huh. And there is one that has a grape flavor from an OU, and as in everything else, I never recommend any commercial hechsher, not the OU, the OK, the Star K. I do not recommend any grape natural flavors from these hashgachas because of the grape juice that they use. So, it's kosher, but it has OU grape juice in it.
And the vitamin drinks, energizer drinks like
those are fine. Those are fine.
Gatorade.
I've never found. I've discussed them. I've seen them. I've never seen a problem with them.
And Red Bull, that doesn't have action.
Red Bull doesn't have action.
So you shouldn't drink it. Okay, which brands of tuna fish are recommended over the others, or are all Hamish tuna fish fine?
That's a very, it's a multifaceted question, because first of all you have to decide whether you need bishalakum on cans. Then you have to decide if you need bishalakum on tuna that comes out of a can. If you hold you need bishal Yisrael, rather, if you hold you need bishal Yisrael, so you have to make sure that you have a hechsher that in fact does. There's a thing called, there was one brand called Finner, something with no use, the Hamish Ingerman, and the first production he told it's going to be like this, and he wrote Bishal Yisrael and he had a mashgiach. The next one he reprinted the boxes without the word Bishal Yisrael, and he had it made without that and put it on the market. And the OU couldn't say anything because they don't hold, you don't need Bishal Yisrael and canned stuff. Meanwhile, people thought that this had Bishal Yisrael. That's a problem. So if you hold that you need Bishal Yisrael, and you hold that you need, there's something else that we discussed previously, that there is a Shitas Rishonim that you need to have a Yid see every fish before it's skinned. And it's a shalos whether it's mitzvah. It's an assay this bomi called the lav of leisechelu about snapper keskeses. And if you hold you need someone to see it, then you need to make sure that you use a hashgacha where there's a mashgiach who sees every fish.
I guess the same thing is with sardines, boneless, skinless, and boneless.
Skinless and boneless. The good news about it, the skinless and boneless, is that usually you can see that it's left on the flesh. You can see where the scales were. If it's not skinless and boneless, you have to be very careful, because we found that not from Morocco is clean. Morocco is always clein, but from Scotland, from Latvia, even the shita, and even those places who held that the anisakis is kosher, the places we were finding it in the sardines was in the stomach, where the kuli alma was also.
I spoke to somebody from the OU who works with the fish over there. He was explaining to me that they hold that the herring doesn't need a mashgiach tamidi, because you could tell on the skin that it's a herring fish. Is that correct?
That they say that, yes.
That they said that, I know. Also, they could put in wine into the ingredients sometimes.
Yeah, but that would show. That you don't have to be cheshish for. The herring, you have to. If you have to have a tviya sign. If it doesn't have, that's the halacha. The halacha is that either it has the skin or it has tviya sign. So I would assume that they have tviya sign.
And damasakis in the herring they find too. Damasakis in the herring.
Do you know what the nickname among fishermen is for anisakis? Herringworm. You know why? Because that's the most common place you find it.
Which herring is clean? If it is.
Well, the herring is on the permitted list from the Vidats, because they said that Yidden aren't going to stop eating herring anyways.
God, the scribe hasn't told me, for those who want to be machmer, that they check every fish.
Shmuel Teitelbaum had.
Shmuel Teitelbaum also?
Yeah. They had it had a very short shelf life, but they had a brand under the Minchas Chinuch that he said the mashgiach checks every fillet.
This topic I spoke about a few times, but I see that it's a chadash every year. We made a tumble a few times already about the seaweed from the sushi, and I'm telling you, a few years ago we found that every single company with the best
there's good news about that. If they would only use good quality product, I've found that the good quality sushi does not have any infestation at all.
So I spoke to one of the mashgichim for the better. There's two good ones in the market that they say are better than other ones, the Velovers and Sweet City with the Star K.
Yeah.
And the other ones are constantly being found here in Eczema and other places. I mean, they all come from the same dirty seawater.
From China.
Yeah.
No, because from China. But if you use the Korean stuff or the good Japanese stuff, it doesn't happen.
So the should ask the Ashgochas, what do you use?
Yeah, like everything.
So which ones are good?
There are certain lots that the Velover, I know there was that Sweet City that goes through that. I don't know what the
Sushi Maven is the other one.
The Sushi Maven, but I don't know what the other ones are. I know that that's what we use. And
there's a lot of canned fish and herrings and such other little mackerels, and I don't know what, that come from Russia and from Ukraine. Are those actually reliable for such things?
I've not. That you certainly, in a filthy place like that, you certainly need a hashgacha tmidus of somebody who's going to look literally at every fish to see what it is.
Lachs and salmon with national lecture, which we know definitely they don't check each fish.
Certainly not, but that's the fun. The salmon itself, he said it here many times, that it has to be a sign. But the problem is, you have to know how they smoke it. There's such a thing called hot smoke, such a thing called cold smoke. The cold smoke has din of ma'ushin, there's no isur b'shalakum on that, and that's not a problem. But if you have a hot smoke, you have to know, it'll say it on the packaging, or at least you can call the company, find out. If it's cold smoke, there's no shiloh that it's fine. If it's hot smoke, it needs bishul yisrael. Simple as that.
Which chocolate do you recommend? Is kosher lechatchila?
It's an interesting development regarding chocolate that for some reason this year it was the glucose syrup that they put in some of the parva chocolates in Europe actually have flour in them. So instead of just being a shiloh, no, you're kashering from chol stam, but you're kashering from chametz. So you have to know what it is that you're kashering from. The potential of chametz. You have shmerling, where you have a very solid hashgacha and a solid kashering, and the Hisachtis told me that the places that they made for their Pesach stuff, they made together with the Bedats, and they did a Keurig Lieben Kal.
That's all the Sachtas chocolates?
Yeah.
Good enough. Baking chocolate a whole year doesn't make a difference. Come to the United States or from other places. There's some that come from other places.
Baking chocolate in the United States should not be a problem.
I'm doing the other that come from the Alpines, Alpros, I think.
It's made outside the United States.
And chocolate chips in the United States.
Chocolate chips in the United States is not a problem.
Which cold breakfast cereals don't you have to worry about Bishul Yisrael and the flavors? Which companies? I mean, get these shadows daily.
Post and Kellogg's have good solid hashgachas l'shitasam. Rav Belsky held that these things, that there's no isur b'shalak on them because it's not el shulch melachim, it's not l'lafas b'yis pas, and it's not pasakum because he said that the cooking was done before and it only goes into the oven to dry it out.
That's a Cheerios, you said that?
Cheerios.
You use one specific.
And I'm not sure. I haven't eaten breakfast in a very long time, so I don't know what else is there. I know Cheerios because I remember Cheerios.
And what about the flavors that go into these things?
The flavors, the flavors are themselves a nicer that the agencies, the OU, even the Chav K, have strong departments for the flavors. If they're buying a company, a big company that's buying from the big flavor companies, manufacturers, are very, very difficult that you'll come across a problem in a flavor.
Hot cereals need a hechsher all year?
It depends. If it's just farina or oatmeal, it does not. If it's flavored, it certainly should have that.
Which company's flavors are good?
Quaker.
Quaker is good.
But you should know that some of them have dairy additives later. The dairy part comes in later than.
Is there any decaffeinated coffee that's kosher for Pesach?
I don't know of any.
Tea for Pesach. Years ago there was a tumult about it.
If it's a botanical, it's not going to be a problem.
There's no problem with the bag, with the string, I remember that they made in China. They made in China tea.
Zalman Krem said that he found that they were putting starch in the bag.
There was a tumult a few years ago. I stopped buying tea.
Yeah.
And he's somebody that he's a very thorough person. He's not.
He's a serious player, but I don't know that it's something that's used much. Okay.
Sugar substitutes. Which ones are good for Pesach? There's xylitol, the Splenda, which was not good.
Each of them are manufactured in plants, even during the year, that require a good hashgacha, at least a hashgacha, because the xylitol and the lactose, these are sugar molecules that are modified, and the bad news is that there are other sugar molecules like lactose that are also modified in the same equipment. And the lactitol will, unless you hold it, lactose is parv. But you should have a decent hashgacha all year. And that the hashgacha for all year will also be good enough for Pesach. So once you have good hashgacha.
And sweet and low, does that have a problem with cream of tartar?
The cream of tartar. So there are those that hold that the cream of tartar itself, the way that you make it, has a din of the Weinstein that is brought down in halacha. That it's in siavish yud beis chedesh. The halacha says that if the Weinstein from which you extract the cream of tartaric acid is nishiavish yud beis chedesh, so there's a shitas Rashba that says that if you bake it in the oven till the same degree, so the agencies do that, and they bake it in the oven. They say that's the same thing as that.
The good news is that the Twizzlers, I had somebody just went through the whole company, he spent many hours, he says, well, even the new flavors of mamash, everything is it's perfect.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to spend the money.
I was just at the company.
Oh, you were at the company? Oh. Now I have two friends over there. Some people don't want to spend money on the lettuce that come with the hechsher, and they buy the Andy Boy. They just go to the regular vegetable store and they buy it regular and they wash it a little bit, and they hope that everything came off. And I have a mumcha that just told me, I challenged anybody, wash your Roman lettuce, check it, bring it to me, and I'm going to find you. And he found them.
Okay.
So I guess it's better to use the ones.
It happens to be that's a very broad statement. And the person is partially correct, because if you don't know and you don't have the patience, or a person with a large family should not be doing that, because here's the way that you can do it, and it comes up perfectly clean. And I challenge that challenger to come to me and show me otherwise, because I had that same thing which I told you, somebody with the strawberries, and I told him how to do it, and he says it can't be. I said, okay, he'll do it and come back. I never heard from him again. If you have the geduld to do it, if you soak it in soapy water, and then you take it, and under warm running water, you take with your fingers and you rub off every part of every leaf. But you have to do not just the first 2 or 3 leaves until you get ice come out there, but all the way through the entire process. You tackle under running water, you rub it on every piece of it. That's perfectly clean.
If there's no leaf miners.
With a brush?
No, with your fingers. You just rub it. You'll wash away every single thing that's there.
What about leaf miners?
The leaf min is a very,
Not
very
so
rare.
common.
What?
Unless it's junky quality.
And that's why if you buy good quality, it's like the leaf miners in the celery. Yeah,
right.
They go. These companies, these Yiddish, Heimish, wonderful people go and they charge these poor Yiddish $1 a piece for these ausgewebte pieces of celery, and the incidence of a problem is 0.05%.
Yeah, they just made a study on it for a few months.
0.05%. It's mamish vicious. It's mamish vicious.
You just the celery you have to clean good on the outside, really good.
That's okay. You wash it off. Okay, Rabbi.
So what's about omelette? What do you want to say?
Oh, what about
Bodek, there's a chevra of mashgichim that are on top of these that check it regularly, and Bodek has been found to be perfectly clean, consistently, and each time they check it. Positive. It seems to me from the numbers that I've seen that they don't, which was the problem all along. I have pictures of grasshoppers in bags of positive lettuce. And positive does not have very good quality control. And some of the bags just go out unclean, not from a kashrus point of view, but simply they're not clean because they don't have good quality control.
That's from present information or old information? I heard they got much better.
I'll tell you the truth, and I can say it right here, where Shiacats is one of the only people in Kashrus that doesn't have enemies, or didn't have enemies. This is an Erlich Yid, he's a fine guy, he's not an aggressive guy. I told Positive that when they mashmutzed Shiacats, they were barbanan. You can't trust them. I don't believe anything they say about anything at all. Period. I hold that they have no nemanis, I hold they're not mentioned, I hold that they'll sell Yidden to pay for stuff, that's all. But there are other people that keep an eye on it, and it is mostly clean. And if you're forced, for lack of any other choice, to get positive, you should take out a handful of leaves, look at them, make sure they're clean, and then you were lucky enough to have gotten from a batch that went through the cleaner correctly.
Well, it's much better than Andy-Boy.
Oh no, you should not be using Andy-Boy.
And what about people shouldn't stop using this instead of? It say positive on 100%, is it rather than...
No. It's certainly, because you're going to find that most of the time it's going to be clean. If you buy Andy Boy and you don't know how to clean it, there is no question you're going to be Ivory Surum their eyes every day.
You mean positive most of the time it comes out good, it's just something happens.
Yeah, that's all. But if you want to be positive about it, then you have to check it yourself.
We had with the Klein's company, with the nuts and with other things, dried fruit this year, terrible incidents until and they were squeezed and they didn't make a recall on it till I don't know what.
Right.
Other companies seem to be much cleaner and much better quality.
If they're still in business, it's Klal Yisrael's fault, because they keep sending a product that is not kosher. Terrible. And the Rav Machsher and the owners, if they can get away with it, they will, obviously.
What about Keurig? There's a lot of people that buy these fancy coffees and they come ready in cups. Do they need a hechsher?
So plain coffee does not require a hechsher. Unflavored. Plain unflavored coffee does not require a hechsher. And Benegay, the question of titling the Keurig machine, the only part of the Keurig machine which really requires tefillah, that's metal, it's not really part of the machine. It's just that sharp edge that pokes it through, and it's not really mishtamish the food. So, Me'ikra Din, the Keurig machine would not seem to need tefillah. You can ask your own paiskim, but I took one apart, and everything is plastic. The heating, the element itself. Okay. If you want to, and you have the mysterious nefesh to make sure to insist that things can be kosher, you can find kosher food. Klal Yisrael should be zeichem Yirtzeh Hashem to follow the streving of a Yiddish neshama to be drawn to kedusha, and that kedusha only comes from making sure you eat ma'acholim that are kosher. A good kebench to kosher Pesach.
Gewaltig. Shane Beacon should like to thank Rabbi and Yechezkel Auerbach Shlita for the wonderful shir, and for sure this was just information to Mechazik in the Kashrus, and everybody should ask their poiskim and follow their poiskim and demand from the stores to give us Kashrus. Also like to thank Rav Zev Weintraub, responsible for the shir Nishmas Over Amos Baramoisha Levi, the Imo Rivke Bas Reb Tzvi. We gaan met Kashrus en met de Shvur Zaken zullen we hier hebben om te met de Shem Amen Gos met het Koei. Yagdol Torah V'Yadeh Kaddish. Kaddish. Meine Herrscher,